what's going on with this Anna Walshe possible, definitely missing, possible unaliving by her husband, Brian Walshe, who is I think he's under house arrest for fraud connected to some Andy Warhol paintings. It's just a whole saga that has been getting some attention in the kind of like evening news world, but not everyone is interested in hearing about this case. But I think it has a lot of importance if we think about the fate of her 3 small children, right? Here's a woman who has been missing since New Year's Day, 2023. And now her children, ages 2, 4, and 6, are in the hands of child services, whatever the acronym is for that in Massachusetts. And the family was living in a small town of less than 10,000 people called Cohasset, which is, I guess, close to Boston, or at least that's the airport that Anna Walshe would use to fly to her job in Washington, D.C., right? This is a woman who is a Serbian immigrant, right? And had, come to the States and pursued her education, went to Cornell, but had, done really great things in her career. I think she married a chef and then divorced the chef, continued to make progress in her career, including, she has quite a sizable real estate portfolio at this point. But, married this man, Brian Walshe. He was 8 years her senior at the age of 39, and significantly at 115 pounds. Her husband Googled how to dispose of the body of a 115-pound woman, among other things, on his son's iPad. I'm assuming his eldest son's iPad. The timeline is disturbing. It all happened this month, right? January 2023. And I've been talking about it a bit on my TikTok, which is, House of Tanya 2. And I was surprised that there were some people who pushed back, as members of a community of color, saying, "Oh, this is not our issue, sis." And I really, it kind of like concerns me that because this woman in question is not a person of color, that some people feel like this is not our issue, whereas I think that it is an issue for women who get married to men. And there's definitely a discussion that's been going on in the level up community, in the kind of Black women luxury community, and the divested woman community among Black women, to say, hey, what happens when you take a risk and get involved with a man who is not on your level? I'll say it that way, because, I guess the curb appeal of Brian Walshe to the divorcee Anna Walshe was great. His father was a prominent neurosurgeon in Boston, maybe the head of his department. The family was, certainly upper middle class. Brian Walshe had fantastic education, boarding school, Harvard, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe a graduate school thrown in there as well. But in the middle of all of this privilege, Brian Walshe, according to the words of one of his relatives, I think it was his cousin, that Brian Walshe didn't actually figure out how to, step from that privilege into a work life in which he made money, right? The connections, the opportunity, the education. The only thing that Brian Walshe seems to have exercised from the point at which he was 13, and people remarked on the fact that he always liked to wear Armani suits. He always liked to sort of be and inhabit that kind of upscale lifestyle. The entitlement is the thing that mattered to him most, whereas, sort of being productive with his privilege it didn't seem to connect. But certainly if you, sort of listen to all the, sort of news reports that I have, there seems to have been a very strong commitment that Brian Walshe had to privilege, moving in privileged circles. He was known, during his romance with Anna Walshe, his eventual wife, he would throw like $20,000 dinner parties. Is that at a restaurant or his home? Certainly the resume, if you looked him up on LinkedIn, looked at his schooling, his background, who his father was, it sounds great. But, all of us who've, either read or heard about what's going on with Prince Harry's book Spare, there's an acknowledgement that coming from money doesn't mean that you have money. Coming from money means, yes, you have education, you have taste, you have friends, but it's not quite the same thing as in the case of Anna Walshe, a woman who came from, I would say, a war-torn country, immigrated, was able to make something of her opportunity, both in terms of education and in terms of her efforts in the professional realm, right? Got married once, got divorced, got remarried to someone who, I'm sure on paper, and I'm sure on a certain level, you're looking around for who to marry. Biological clock may have been ticking. Eldest child is 6, so at age, I guess, 33, she must have had her first child. But now, this, 3 kids in, marriage to this person, and it has all sort of come to a devastating end. But let's backtrack, right? This fella, Brian Walshe, early in their dating life, Anna Walshe had actually contacted the police in Washington, D.C., which is where they met, and said that Brian Walshe had threatened to unalive her and a friend by telephone. The investigation grinded to a halt because Anna would not cooperate, and then she eventually married this person. In the narcissist world, there are some significant red flags about Brian Walshe. Number one is the grandiosity. I'm sure he was leading with the resume, who his family was, who he went to school with, who his connections were, throwing money around, dinners, lavish kind of upscale experiences, whatever that was, whether they were traveling together, etc. I did hear tell that that Brian had bought Anna a Maserati at some point, I guess in the course of their marriage. But all of those things can be very enchanting and enticing. But then at the same time, here's this man making unaliving threats within the course of, I'm sure, the first year of their interaction. I don't know if they were friends first or if it was immediately a dating situation, but that's troubling to hear, especially in light of recent events. But I think sometimes as women, if someone manhandles us or is aggressive with us, we can interpret that as being passionate or being manly. We can sometimes fall into what's called trauma bonding, where the shock and awe of a threat to your life, it's almost like you can't believe it, right? You can't believe that that person on the elevator is a threat. You don't want to believe that that person kind of standing around in the parking garage could possibly be a threat to you. You think that that hostile neighbor, that, cranky ex who's stalking you, oh, no, that, I'm overreacting. It couldn't be that serious. Or could it? Fast forward several years, Anna Walshe had worked her way up in her industry. She was working for Tishman Speyer. She's got this husband, right? All of his privilege, all of his consulting. Who among us doesn't know someone who doesn't have a job who creates a consulting firm? Allegedly, in my opinion, right? If you look at Brian Walsh's resume, it's like, what a guan? What is the job that you've had? Because apparently, dude got into something with a friend where he'd gotten his hands on the friend's Andy Warhol original paintings, 2 of them, and then said, oh, let me sell these for you to my, you know, highfalutin, well-heeled connects. He didn't do that. He didn't sell them. He didn't give them back to the owner of the paintings. What he did do was sell, according to, you know, federal court records, he sold, what is it called? Unauthenticated dupes for the actual paintings, and accepted, you know, I believe it was $80,000 for them. But then when they could not, they didn't, you know, they were unframed and they didn't have the authentication stamp, the buyer contacted him, got blocked, contacted Brian Walsh's mother, got blocked, and then eventually contacted Anna Walshe, I believe through her work, to get to Brian, and, you know, got the runaround, only got $30,000 of the $80,000 paid back, and then it all went to like court and federal court, ending up with a ankle monitor, right? We know a Dusty gonna end up in a situation, right? Shenanigans, con artistry, being a stunt queen, and when they get caught, there you go, ankle monitor. But what's significant is that this ankle monitor was not the GPS style of ankle monitor. It's only the radio frequency style. What that means is that once that thing is on the ankle, authorities can tell if you've left your home. They can't tell exactly where you went. Make a note of that, right? So here's this fella making threats. He and Anna get married. There's, you know, these beautiful wedding photos. You know, she felt like she had found a high value man based on what Brian, I'm sure, emphasized about himself, who his family was, who his father was, who his connects were from boarding school or Ivy League college, all that. That all sounds great on paper. Then you figure out that the art fraud wasn't the first fraud, because when his father died, Brian had been disinherited. He destroyed the will, but a friend of the father had taken a photo of it. He stole, allegedly, $1 million from his father while his father was alive, which is why he was disinherited. And then upon his father's death, he got into the bank accounts and other things, and then spent up, I believe it was $100,000. So, you know, his cousin, at least one cousin, is talking about this to the press. So, you know, that just goes to show you, this dude ain't nothing. He's a bum. He's a Dusty. He is, you know, coasting on sort of what his father and what his family provided for him in terms of, again, the resume, the curb appeal. Looks great, sounds great. He's not going to sit there with his new girlfriend after threatening her life and say, oh, by the way, you know, I'm disinherited because I stole money from my father. Oh, by the way, I tried to destroy my father's will and like take money from his estate without permission, right? Everyone has to go to, on top of grieving, everyone has to go to court and figure all this out, right? I believe the father's will read something like, oh, latte chapstick. I don't have it handy right now, but I do see that if you go on Amazon, you're able to see different flavors of chapstick that are available. I haven't been wearing a mask lately, so I haven't really been kind of putting that into my purse, but it is lovely. And the last time I did check, there is a 3-pack of not only the latte, but I think there's a caramel macchiato and maybe some sort of mocha flavor of the chapstick. And it is that good, especially if you have to, you know, wear a mask because it's cold or wear a mask because of the... Anyway, the, you know, as with most confidence artists, right? Their whole game is to convince you that you should have confidence in them, that you should feel like the dude is from an upscale family. You know, Anna was apparently someone of means. Other flavors on hand. I don't have them on hand, but I do know that you can get your hands on the flavors by, you know, looking on Amazon or other kind of drugstore retailers like CVS or Walgreens. And there's a whole bunch of flavors. I was stunned at how accurate and delicious the coffee flavors are. And because you asked, I'll make an effort to try to track that down and then leave it in the comments for you. You know, good catch. It is a quality product, especially if you're going skiing or snowboarding and you want something that's not cherry or mint or something like that. Blue Label. No, to my recollection, the coffee flavors of chapstick are black labeled. They're kind of like black and brown and beige. And they have kind of like an interesting color story that's a little bit more kind of coffee house. SPF 15. I'm not sure right now. I know I have a mint one that is, I think it was a matcha mint or a green tea mint one that is SPF 15, but I'd have to check. Moisturizer line. Which moisturizer? Sorry, I'm getting distracted. What I just put on my face was a blue wrapper. Sorry, can't recall. Blue wrapper moisturizer. I know I've used some e.l.f. products, and then recently I've gotten my hands on some CBD based creams of different sorts that are quite good, but these are more pain relief icy roll-on with CBD, and then this one is a pain relief cream with 600 milligrams of CBD, and these are quite nice, but they're less moisturizers than they are pain relief creams that have CBD and arnica. You'll recall Amber Heard's lawyer having talked about arnica chapstick moisturizer. Well, there is also the chapstick Total Hydration line, which is a lip gloss that has color. Total Hydration is definitely available. It's more of a kind of like lip oil, more of a lip oil than the kind of traditional waxy chapstick. And it comes in versions that don't have color and don't have scent, as well as ones that do have a bit of like rosy color or kind of nude color. Just be careful to read the full descriptions when you're looking to make a purchase or when you see them in store, just so that you don't end up with color if you don't want it. In every gas station? Possibly. You know, I don't tend to, I'm usually so like freaked out by all those like crime, all the different crime videos at the gas station, and I'm like, must have card or cash in hand, must lock doors, must get in and get out. I'm not really someone who's going to hang out inside the gas station, because I don't know about where you live, but gas stations in, you know, Los Angeles and Hollywood are like something out of The Walking Dead, because of, you know, unfortunately people are dealing with the pain of addiction and it's, you know, it's a little bit too much to take. But today what I have handy is Lip Medex from Blistex. This was actually a favorite product of mine when I was in high school, but it has camphor in it and it feels very comforting on the lips, although, you know, I think it has a little bit more spiciness and scent than you might prefer, especially if your goal is to have something pleasant and, you know, have a little bit more of a gloss. This kind of moisturizes your lips, but it doesn't do anything dramatic, right? Anything left over you can always rub into your cuticles. We're all trying to grow our nails back and it's winter and that makes it tough. But back to Anna Walshe, the late Anna Walshe, and her husband Brian Walshe. You know, I do think that Brian Walshe saw in Anna an eligible, attractive woman who was doing well, and I'm not sure of the timing of his art-related fraud. I am guessing that maybe that happened during the marriage, right? He was trying to get a quick, you know, kind of year's salary. He could have cleared $80,000 off of selling fraudulent duplicates of the paintings. He could have pocketed that money and then given the paintings back. But I think to this day, the authentic paintings haven't been returned. And then on top of it, you know, imagine you get hoodwinked into a marriage. You have 3 kids super quick, right? As I've discussed, like that's how Dusties lock you down. They lay the pipe, they get you pregnant. You feel like, you know, especially married, right? I noticed that Anna Walshe kept all of her assets solely in her name. But if hubby was a consultant who was housebound with an ankle monitor, how much work, how much earning could he have been doing? Because in a way, it would be great. Like, oh, okay, honey, I'm going to go work a high-powered job for Tishman Speyer, top real estate firm. You stay home and take care of the kids. No, like most men of privilege, like most men in marriages, he ain't going to do childcare. She's paying for a nanny, and he's home all the time. She's paying for him to live, food, car, insurance. To my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, still this man, he's in her house with her children. She's going up and down the road, not driving an hour, not driving 2 hours. She's getting on an airplane and flying to Washington, D.C. every week, right? This has been going on 6 years plus, however long they were married. But I'm sure this was not putting a smile on her face. Now, if this is the same man who had threatened her life at the dating stage, imagine what that mentality evolved into once they were married and she was locked down with 3 kids. Now, one of the most concerning things about the whole situation is that the 3 children, since the husband was arraigned for unaliving, and the most serious charge of that, he is in custody. He has a mother who lives in the same area, not in Cohasset, but in another town that has a kind of odd name that I can't recall. There at the mother's condo is where police were able to recover footage of Brian Walshe dragging a lot of heavy trash and trash bags to the dumpsters. And they've been able to recover some of the material from those dumpsters that contained DNA evidence linking husband and wife to the materials. And for my ladies out there, significantly found her hunter boots, her Prada bag, and her necklace, which if one of the recent photos of her is to be believed, I believe it was a Gucci necklace. Now we know it also her COVID-19 vaccination card. So as women, we know the things that we love, we carry with us: our jewelry, our purse, our boots. These are upscale items. Your COVID-19 vaccination card, you often need that to board planes, to go into lounges, to, you know, do a lot of things. Those are like basic ID items that you have to have on your person, right? What became of her driver's license, passport, etc.? But had it not been for recovering those materials with DNA evidence, right? Because the husband misled investigators. The husband was arrested first for misleading investigators, right? Let's back up. Anna Walshe was kind of a baller in the real estate world, right? How does someone who's an immigrant from Serbia accumulate the capital necessary to buy a portfolio of multi-million dollars worth of properties solely in her name, right? Question mark. Why would someone in her position, young, attractive, thin, white, choose to be with this man 8 years her senior. We've discussed his educational and family background, right? I'm sure Brian Walsh's mother knows who he is and what he did with his financial shenanigans vis-a-vis her husband when the husband was alive, the doctor father of Brian Walsh, that is. And number two, what happened with the execution of the will, the destruction of the will by Brian Walsh after her husband had died. Now, Brian Walsh is saying to the police, oh, you know, I just took my son to the Press Juicery to get a milkshake. Can you get a milkshake at Press Juicery? If you know, please comment in the chat. He also told investigators that he only went to the juice spot and then he went to Whole Foods and one other place for his mother, right? Went to Whole Foods and I believe some other store, and he said he bought like cleaning supplies, like cleaning wipes for his mother and stuff at Whole Foods. Now, the misleading the investigators, I believe, is connected to the fact that he did not talk about his trip to Home Depot to buy $450 worth of cleaning supplies in cash. Didn't mention that. He also did not talk about the fact that, you know, on the day when he left the home to run these errands on behalf of his mother, right? If 11 a.m. was the trip to get the shake with his, I guess, eldest son, right? Nanny at the house, then in the afternoon, he cruised over to his mother's house, or maybe he did the errands on the way to the mother's house, but he left his cell phone at home. He told investigators he didn't have his cell phone because his son had misplaced it, right? We know that cell phones ping wherever they go, so it is possible for investigators to track your movements. Once again, that ankle monitor. What kind of Dusty in a marriage with 3 small children can you trust who has to stay in the house unless he gets prior permission to leave the house with an ankle monitor? Huge red flag, right? Once again, threats to her life by this Dusty before they were married, other red flag. But here on the day, right, the couple had hosted a colleague of Anna for a New Year's dinner, and Brian Walsh, smoothie smooth, never known to even raise his voice, had cooked an elaborate New Year's Eve dinner. And the guests had gone home at like 1:30 in the morning. Brian Walsh claimed that Anna Walsh then was going to get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and get a ride share to the airport to go deal with a work emergency. How? Nothing opens for business on New Year's Day, right? New Year's Day, I believe, was the Monday, first of the month, this month, right? Nothing opened for business again until Tuesday, Wednesday. So why would you travel? Nothing's open. It's a question. It's possible, but it's a question. But there was no record of Anna Walsh ever taking a ride share in the very early morning on New Year's Day. What there is a record of is footage of Brian Walsh, to my eyes, alone in the smoothie or juice shop, right? He was not found on any footage at Whole Foods, etc. Where he was found on camera was Home Depot, in a mask, perhaps also with his head covered, buying $450 worth of cleaning supplies. Like, a man with a nanny isn't going to buy cleaning supplies. He wasn't buying Formula 409 and rubber gloves. That was something that someone else did. This is a man of privilege. This is a man with a wife. He has all kinds of helpers and staff that she's paying for. You gonna tell me he's in there, what, buying Tide? No. Stain remover? Well, perhaps. There could have been, and there is alleged to have been, some issues in the house because investigators, once having been misled by Brian Walsh about where he went, where he was, And in the meantime, a property that was in Anna Walsh's portfolio had recently, I think she sold their old residence, and there was a fire at that residence, right? So that created one distraction. The other distraction was the bad information about where Brian Walshe had gone and what he was doing. All of these are what you call dilatory tactics, right? It wasn't going to stop them eventually once he was arrested for misleading authorities. They did get a warrant and searched the house and found blood evidence in the basement, and then found the evidence that they found in trash cans and whatever. But the whole dilatory, right, meaning to delay, that Brian Walshe thought if he dragged his feet, created a little ruckus over here, had people spinning their wheels over here to figure out where he was and what he was doing, that enough time would pass so that, perhaps and allegedly, the trash bags into which cleaning supplies and whatever needed to be cleaned, they would be given enough time for the pickup and the sanitation to take them to the landfill or the incinerator, etc. And in fact, that did happen. There were a few scraps that were still discovered despite all of that delay. And furthermore, a list of 20 Google searches that Brian Walshe had made on his son's iPad, I guess figuring, well, they won't look here, right? Just like Bugs Bunny, right? The whole expectation, like, them cops are never going to look in the oven. They're never going to look on my son's iPad. Oh, it's just, learning numbers and letters and colors. No, they looked, and what they found were searches like, what is formaldehyde going to do? Does baking soda make a body not smell? How do you dispose of the body of a 115-pound woman? Very, very specific, and within a time frame of the last few days when the couple was back together, right? Anna Walshe had purchased a whole home down in DC, set up bedrooms for her 3 children, right? Had contacted her own mother and her own sister prior to her disappearance, begging them to come and be with her, right? Had that friend come over to New Year's dinner, and that friend went home. And whatever her instincts were telling her, whatever that urgent need she had for her own mother, who was living in Serbia, perhaps dealing with the aftermath of a stroke, her own sister who's living up in Canada, and I believe might be married or have her own family or some situation. In any case, both of those close relatives said no and did not come to help. What's tragic is that, given the history, there had to have been some level of conflict, and maybe Anna Walshe was making plans. She recently had sold an apartment that she owned. I dare say the couple owned, but I think she owned it. Was there some prenup? Was there something that made her real estate holdings and assets hers alone? One of the most troubling searches that Brian Walshe made on his son's iPad, it was 2 things. One, what is the best state for men to divorce in? And number 2, how long does it take to inherit assets after your spouse's death? So once again, this person, Brian Walshe, was returning to his old way of making money, which was rubbing his hands together and waiting to inherit, right? Either to steal, embezzle, or steal, hide the will, and play shenanigans during a kind of like reading of a will and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what all the details are, but this certainly doesn't seem like a new set of motives and actions for Brian Walshe, right? Imagine, he's got all the time in the world. He's stuck at home. Can't leave. Every time he wants to go, I don't know. Every time he wants to leave the house, he's got to get prior permission, right? And another issue that was weighing down heavily on this Brian Walshe character is the whole notion of having been, I believe, convicted, and I believe there was some kind of pushback where the case was disposed. Maybe that was an earlier case that was disposed, and Brian Walshe would not take accountability. He would not ever agree that he was culpable for the crime. I'll have to look into that again, but I'm just trying to summarize all of this so that if you are as incensed by this as I am, that you can, you know, follow up and look into these matters, because it's not like there weren't red flags and history for this character, because he had done these kinds of, you know, basically he wanted the money. Was he ever in love with this woman, or did he just decide that she fit the bill for marriage because she had assets, right? And no criminal record. And maybe it was significant that her close family were not in the country. I mean, I'm thinking of like Melania Trump. Like Melania Trump immigrated and then brought her parents to the country, right? Anna's mom was still in Serbia and her sister's in Canada, and no one can travel to come see about her, right? You have a living mother of Anna. You have Brian Walshe's living mother. Anna has a sister. Anna was also involved in some sort of like immigrant center to which she donated money and helped with their galas. And there was a woman who was interviewed on the news from that center. I'll have to pull up the name of it and put it on the screen in a graphic. But the police had to step in to stop that immigrant center from raising money in Anna's name and in the name of her children, because they did not agree or authorize that that should happen, right? So you're also like, wow. Meanwhile, the kids are all in the custody of the state. They're in foster care. 3 children under the age of 6 in foster care, when there are 2 grandmothers, an aunt. I can't recall whether Brian Walshe had siblings, but I know he has at least one cousin that was getting in that ass about, you know, Brian Walshe and his financial shenanigans. Now, the other issue from the art fraud was that Brian Walshe was convicted and then ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution. Now, if you're at home and the only person really earning money is your wife, and this has been a years-long situation where you're just not able to pay this restitution, then where is this all going? You keep having children, right? You're married. I don't imagine that immigration was an issue because Anna had been married to someone else, a chef, before. What was it about this man that kept Anna Walshe in this marriage? And it seemed like by selling that apartment that they owned, there was a couple that was living there and had renovated it who were talking on the news. She sold it in a rush and got cash, and the person who bought it said that she seemed to be in a hurry. Then there was that other property that used to be the family residence that she had sold, and that's where the fire was mysteriously started. Anna had a whole house with bedrooms for her children in Washington, D.C. And Anna had expressed to friends that she wanted to have, you know, her children with her. She could leave the house. Brian Walshe couldn't, right? So he laid there in wait, probably telling her whatever she wanted to hear to keep the money flowing, right? This is a dude who never really earned on his own. He never really provided for himself, right? He stole all this money from his father, $1 million, according to reports, right? Whatever, 100,000 more when he got into the bank accounts after his father's death, a successful neurosurgeon. Imagine. His own mother is there near him. Neither grandma could take the children. The aunt in Canada couldn't cross the border and take the children. The mom in Serbia, sick, can't take the children. No relatives, the children are in foster care. The children are still in foster care. Daddy's going to be banged up for a while, it would appear. And it is a situation, it's like one of those like crime shows where, you know, I think maybe if Brian Walshe is guilty of the unaliving of his wife, that, you know, perhaps he thought, oh, the failsafe is if I delay enough and the body is incinerated and they can't find it, no body, no case, right? But that isn't always the case, right? How nice does this look? If you've been wondering, I've been putting on some of this Maybelline Superstay Hybrid Powder Foundation, and it's a wonderful product. This is the paler shade that I got, and it doesn't look entirely crazy. I put on a deeper shade last night, but even with a light application with this brush, it actually looks normal and human, right? This is without any kind of real complexion product on. So, at this point in time, I think a lot of people are concerned that, you know, here are these 3 children in foster care. Will they be taken by a foster family together, or will they be separated? And I think that as people of color, we also have to wonder how this case resonates with the fortune of, you know, Black women whose children who have been taken into the foster care system in different states, how the reputation of foster care and the child services agencies or department or whatever it's called in different states, how they have the reputation of being a pipeline for nefarious actors and nefarious processes. I'll just put it like that. How can it be? Brian Walshe's mom is out and creeping around free. Anna Walsh's mom is over there in Serbia. The sister's in Canada. Canada's a hop, skip, and a jump, especially if you're in New England. What is going on? And again, how, once you knew that dude was under federal charges for fraud connected to these paintings. Now, I don't know what the story is with the friend who was the owner of the 2 paintings by Andy Warhol, but I can only imagine that that person must be severely annoyed and very disappointed in Mr. Brian Walshe. And if that's the case, all of this, you know, sort of hot pot of grits boiled over when it was Christmas time, right? Anna Walsh's attempts to have, you know, male friends over, people in the mix. She had an active social life. I have yet to hear any, you know, friend or advocate of Brian Walshe come forward to say what a great guy he is. Oh, this can't be true because he's such a perfect angel. I haven't even seen his own mother come forward and make a statement. And again, why are the children in foster care? During the global panini, institutions, I don't think, are any place that you want small children, right? Probably unvaccinated, probably under a great deal of stress after, you know, missing their mom for so many weeks at this point. This is a very fresh situation. And it is a troubling situation. And I think that all of us, you know, and I believe as women of color as well, that this is an important case to look at, because it's like, how quick was the foster care system kind of put into the game to grab hold of those children in a situation where not even, you know, I'm not educated enough about these departments and processes, but it definitely seems odd. It's not like these children are orphans. They have very, very close relatives alive in the world, alive in the country, etc. But to go into foster care seems high risk for the children. I'll put it like that. I'm trying to think. Am I skipping over anything? We've talked about Brian Walshe and his threats and his fraud and his, you can look him up on LinkedIn and see what his jobs are, but the fact is he's been under house arrest for years with this $500,000 ticket hanging over his head. How else was he going to pay it unless wifey came up off that money, right? I'm sure he felt entitled to the money, and yet all of those real estate assets were in her name. Was the quick sale of that apartment about cobbling together money to give to him? Was the purchase of that home with bedrooms set up for her children, was that an indication that Anna Walshe was making moves to consciously uncouple from Brian Walshe? And imagine what he was going to do if he lost the wife and her purse, if he lost primary custody of those children. How could he front then? If he did not have custody of those children, he wouldn't have gotten child support. Would he have gotten spousal support? I'm unclear. I don't know what the rules about divorce are in the state of Massachusetts, but I'm guessing they hadn't been married 10 years yet. 10 years is often some sort of milestone in the divorce world. Is the fact that he was home and not working because of fraud and house arrest, does that mean that he gets alimony at all for life, for a year, to get on his feet? What kind of job are you going to get as a white-collar criminal with fraud conviction and $500,000 in restitution? $500,000 based on absconding with and hiding paintings that are probably worth quite a lot. Does the restitution amount have to do with the crime and the value of the paintings? Or does it have to do with like wire fraud and rules about using things like eBay and interstate commerce to move money fraudulently based on counterfeit? I'm not sure, question mark. But at this point, I think that a month is going to go by before the next court date for Brian Walshe. In his, the arraignment was the formal reading of the murder charges. No body, blood, valuables, vaccination card, his blood, her blood, in the house, on the materials recovered from various dumpsters, along with footage of him moving cleaning materials and trash bags and a plastic liner that was in the back of his Volvo into different dumpsters near his mom's condo, maybe in different parts of the area. But it certainly seems to point to a disturbing picture of a husband who was through. The fact that he Googled, how do you dispose of the body of a 115-pound woman? And then he threw away her valuables, right? If you're a woman, you know, you love that product. You love your COVID-19 vaccine card. It's a memento. If somebody about you, they would hold on to all of those things. But just goes to show you, it doesn't matter if you're married. It doesn't matter if you have kids together. It doesn't matter that you're supporting this man. Every morsel of food that went in his mouth, every drink he got from Press Juicery, those are like $6 or $8 or $10 bottles of juice. Do they make milkshakes? Just the casualness of his misleading information to the police, the calculatedness of, oh, okay, the dumpster picks up on Tuesday after the holiday, and if this much time goes by, the incineration schedule is like this, and I'll be over here, and I'll tell him I was over there, and I know my ankle monitor won't tell them exactly where I went, and if I don't have my phone with me, I can claim that I got lost on the way to my mom's house, even though I'm sure I go to my mom's house all the time. And, you know, but again, when you don't have a job and you're just in the house being greedy, the way he had been when he was in his father's house, the way he had been when his father was still alive and Brian was out in the world, not really wanting to take a full-time job and earn a living like a grown-up. He was, you know, stealing money, using money, throwing it around, dressing to impress. Armani suits as a child, Armani clothing as a child. So as an adult, I'm sure he stayed in that, you know, upscale, you know, whatever the brands are, whatever the suits are, but definitely the entertaining, the social. We all know what, you know, the kind of like East Coast WASP lifestyle, the look, the shoes, the money, the vacations, the whole thing, the opera, the Philharmonic, the car, the Maserati. How does a man with no job of note afford a Maserati, right? What? I would love to see the forensic accounting on this marriage and this case, but you know, just let this be. If we don't have enough warnings about Dusties and about hypogamy, the practice of marrying down, I'm sure that Anna Walshe did not know this fella was marrying down or having children with someone who was beneath her, but certainly he didn't have her chutzpah, her hustle, her business acumen, because like a lot of men, like a Donald Trump, he can only inherit and gamble with money. He cannot make money. And if he needs to, he's going to turn to nefarious sources and nefarious acts to get more. And that certainly seems to be what the case is at this point in time for Mr. Brian Walshe, who is held somewhere. I'm sure it's a jail, right? I don't think it's prison, because I don't think you go to prison unless you're convicted on capital charges, but it's wild. You know, this woman had this fiend, in my opinion, allegedly colonize her body, created 3 beautiful children for this man, and he treated her like the garbage bags that he purchased, I'm sure, with her money. There, I said it. I'm appalled by this case. I am, you know, I feel invested in the outcome, because it's like, Anna Walshe seems like she was a good girl. I don't know everything. I don't know why she felt like she was trapped in a marriage with this fella. Something was wrong, and her moves seemed to indicate that she was going to make some different moves, and maybe he did this to stop her. Maybe he was trying to be slick just so that he could solve not only his financial problems, the things that he owed and that were outstanding, but so that he'd have a purse, again, like the money he took from his father, with which he could, you know, he could use it as operating capital so that he could go back to his ways, which were, you know, throwing elaborate dinner parties and getting sympathy because he's a widow and he doesn't, I mean, according to him, if people believed him, he would have said, yeah, she left in a rideshare and went to work. I don't know what happened. So that he would just sit there and play innocent, and what, her body was never supposed to be found, or what? 3 small children. And he's looking in those children's faces and allegedly doing all this to their mother in the house. But, you know, this guy is soft-spoken and never raised his voice, never, you know, he's not a aggressive, like, gonna come at you with a loud criminal technique. He's gonna be soft-spoken and making you dinner and playing the role until, you know, you think about what it takes to butcher any kind of like food, whether it's, you know, a whole I don't know, a whole chicken, or if you've ever, you know, sort of butchered game if you're a hunter. But 115-pound woman, and allegedly this is what he did in the house that he is alleged to have done, this very intimate, very hands-on unaliving. There was no bullet involved. It was obviously either a this and a this, or a certainly this. Among his purchases were like hacksaw and Tyvek suit, which is that white suit that covers your head and your feet that people, you know, go to contaminated crime scenes in, and paid for all of that with cash. I mean, it just definitely seems premeditated and planned out, and this whole schedule of lies and misleading information, in my opinion, allegedly, it was all, to me, a gambit. another gamble with other people's time, lives, and money to get him what he wanted, because he's a narcissist. He's the important one, more important than his father, more important than his relatives, more important than his wife, more important than his children, more important than the truth, more important than justice. Him. And it wouldn't be hard to see the footage of him, smiling and smirking upon his arrest, right? And I believe the arrest at the time was for misleading investigators, but now we know it has evolved into capital charges. So, in any case, this is Tanya Young, kind of summarizing this whole unfortunate accusation of murder for Brian Walshe, husband of the missing and presumed late Anna Walshe, who, by, everything I've learned, has been like a hardworking young immigrant woman who came to this country and did well with her education and her career and her real estate work, but ended up trusting the wrong Dusty and getting into a marriage with him, marrying down someone who was not on her level of achievement. And we know a lot of women who are in this position with men who don't earn, don't have the ambition. They are very happy to be another one of your children for whom you have to provide and you have to do everything for, including have nannies and house cleaners, because he doesn't even feel guilty about the fact that you're paying all the bills. Who am I talking to? But in any case, this is me summarizing the situation. And then you have child services stepping into the fray and taking all those children into foster care. Why? Wow. How? For how long? Is there not anyone in the family or friend circle who can keep those children together and get them out of foster care? I hate to say it, but foster care does not have a good reputation. Not in the United States. Disagree with me if you must, but these are my questions, and this is why I feel like this is a compelling case for us to learn about and keep watch over, because as privileged as Anna Walshe and her husband are, in terms of their ethnicity, their money, where they're located in the country, think about how these troubling trends and injustices as far as her life, her children, her assets, are. Imagine being someone who is of color and poor with a parent in a foreign country, a sister in another country, and nobody's able to make moves on the heels of an emergency like this. I will update you as soon as there's an update, but it's all very troubling, and I think that it definitely makes you think. But in any case, I'm going to hop off, and I will update you as soon as I have more information. Thank you for joining me on my live House of Tanya SISTA Says, because we need to talk about it. Okay? See you next time. Bye.